Hello there, this is David from David Books and Comics, and today we're going to look through some creations by Denny O'Neil. And the book I'm going to review is Dragon's Fists, but I'm also going to look at his other two books, Helltown and Batman Nightfall, which is a written novel based on the comic series about Batman and the Nightfall sequence of comic books. So Denny O'Neil died in 2020, and I think a lot of people know of his work, both as editor, uh, mostly at DC Comics, but also at Marvel Comics. Many of his comic books work was in Batman and the Green Lantern, Green Arrow series. And he was the writer and creator with James R. Barrie of this novel, Kung Fu Master Dragon's Fists, as by Jim Dennis. And I don't know much about the other writer, but I suspect, just knowing from the plot, that Denny O'Neil probably wrote most of the story, and that Barrie's contribution was more along the lines of the kind of the mystical Eastern mysticism and philosophical parts of the book. But for Denny O'Neil, I think he's really the fellow who created the plot. The novel Dragon's Fist tells the history of a spoiled rich kid who continues on with his spoiled kind of escapades until he meets with a powerful sensei, a guy simply called O Sensei, in Japan, where his rich father had been stationed. Basically, according to the book, his rich father paid his way into that position. His father or mother never appear in any kind of major significance in the novel. They're there, and then they maybe one or two sentences, and that's about it. The novel introduces a plot O'Neil would use in the three books. First, this book, and then in Nightfall, and then in Helltown. The plot goes something like this. All three books are linked by characters that O'Neil created, and namely Richard Dragon, who appeared in Helltown, and Lady Shiva, who appears in Helltown and in Batman Nightfall. The similar plot is like this. Our main protagonists are roundly defeated and beaten, and then they're trained in the martial arts. In Helltown, the main character is Vic Sage, the Question. And the main character here is, of course, Batman. So in Helltown, in Batman, Batman is beaten by Bane. And it's the famous portion where Bane breaks Batman's back. And in this one, he is beaten by a bunch of thugs, and he is trained by Dragon in the martial arts and Lady Shiva. In Batman Nightfall, the Batman is beaten by Bane and trained in the martial arts by Lady Shiva. Lady Shiva was the creation of Eric Estrada, Wally Wood, great artist, and Denny O'Neil in the 5th issue of Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter. And so, anyways, that was the creation of Denny O'Neil and, like I said, Rick Estrada. And Wally Wood. So, let's see. Lady Shiva is the one who trains Batman and raises him back to health. Similar plots where the senseis, O Sensei, Lady Shiva, and Richard Dragon are portrayed as kind of mystical grand masters of the martial arts. So, all similar plots. In Dragon's Fists has Richard Dragon working for an agency called GOOD, Good, which is an acronym that is never defined, similar to the Destroyer series where CURE, cure, is never defined. And in the novel, he's hired by a guy named Barney Aki to rescue and recover a girl named Carolyn Watami. Dragon is rescuing the girl for his own reasons, but Good, GOOD, wants the girl because she was given secret numbers that were a formula for a powerful bomb. Richard Dragon, investigates on his own. He ends up falling in love with a prostitute named Janine, who he meets in France when he is on this hunt for Carolyn Watami. Carolyn Watami was kidnapped by this mysterious kidnapper called the Swiss. Janine, this prostitute, is murdered, and Dragon has to suppress his anger and rage in order to confront the villain, the Swiss. The book has plenty of martial art fight scenes and has a valid Eastern mystical thinking that's part of the plot, which could pass as a scholastic publication for high schools if it wasn't for the few adult scenes and some violence in the books. So that's Dragon's Fists, a well-written series of books by Denny O'Neil, James R. Barrie, and with similar plots in the other two books, also by Denny O'Neil, the novelization of the comic series. It's well written, by the way. If you're I read this first before I read the comic books. I read some of the comic books. I didn't read the entire Nightfall sequence. And I've always been a fan of The Question. If you want to read The Question in novel form, Vic Sage, The Question, this is the book to read. Helltown, well written novel. If you don't like the comic books, read the books. You won't be disappointed. And of course, really well written, plotted, great story, great characters. The cover art, I believe, I read and discovered, is by a guy named Christos Akaleos. All right, so that's that. And this, Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter, the comic books, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the Classics Illustrated version of this novel. And the novel starts out differently than the first pages of this. The first pages of this starts with his confrontation with the Sensei. In the novel, it starts out as Richard Dragon is already living in New York City, and he's already a Grand Master Sensei with his own school of martial arts. All right, so that's that. And as I said, we had a power outage there. This is the first appearance of Lady Shiva. If you're interested in purchasing the book, this was published back in 1974, I believe. Let me take a look. And the reason why I say that and mention that is because the year, it's the cheapest martial arts or kung fu comic book. The year here, yeah, 75. So published in 1975, it is one of the cheapest comic books from the 70s that you can purchase in terms of first appearances. The Marvel equivalent of this, which would be Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, which was really well written, well drawn, and had incredible artists working on it. And if you've checked out some of my episodes, I feature some of these artists in when I go through my collection of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. But the first appearance of Richard Dragon was in the novel. And the novel, I'm sad to say, is far superior to the comic book, especially the first one. The subsequent comic books, like number 3, features artwork by Jack Kirby, and the later issues 4 and 5 feature artwork by the great Wally Wood. So they're well worth tracking down, and they're really cheap in comparison to the Shang-Chi books. The first appearance of Shang-Chi will, even in low grade, will be in the hundreds of dollars. Whereas this you can find in the bargain bin for $5. Anyway, so here it is. I wanted to show this, Richard Dragon, Dragon's Fists by Jim Dennis, writing, Denny O'Neil writing as Jim Dennis with James R. Barry. And the similar plots and connecting characters that he brings into, you can read all 3 books. You can read all 3 books like a trilogy almost, because they all interlink with the characters that he created. Anyway, by far, and you just look at the size of these things. They're good reads, but look how thick they are. This one is a quick, fast read. The entire story told in fast-paced action. So well worth tracking down if you can find it. I'm sure you can find it in a good used paperback bookstore. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your subscriptions. And as always, feel free to make your comments. All right. Thanks. Bye.